Hello, everybody out there in YouTube land. Glad to have you with me here on this Sunday evening, the 24th day of July 2016. I have another little story time story to tell you that I thought you might get a chuckle out of. I maybe even have a moral at the end of it. My daddy was the fifth of seven children. His oldest sister's name was Nanny, and by the time Daddy was born, she was out, married, and on her own. She she was kind of a funny sort of individual, and not in a ha-ha way. I remember really kind of becoming aware of her when I was around 5 years old, because I'd heard a lot of the relatives talk, when everybody gathered round about poor old Nanny, poor old Nanny. Well, when I was about 5 years old, I remember Mom and Dad said, "Oh, we got to go to Hamilton to see Aunt Nanny. She's bad off. She's bad off." So we packed up in the car and off we went. Seemed like an awful long ways away from home, but it wasn't, looking back on it now, it wasn't that far. For a little kid, it was a long ride. And we get down to Aunt Nanny's house to see her because, apparently she's on her last leg. And we get there, and her husband, Uncle John, was scrubbing the floors. On his hands and knees, he was just scrubbing the floors. And it was raining outside. We wiped our feet before we walked in, and he had that scrub brush, and he's scrubbing the floors right behind us. Aunt Nanny's sitting on it. Well, she's kind of reclined on the couch, and she's crocheting an afghan, and she's moaning and groaning about how bad off she is. Oh, she's bad off. She's awful sick. She's not long for this world, and she's going on and on and on. And the whole time we're there, Uncle John's scrubbing and cleaning stuff. I mean, he's just the best housemaker you ever seen in your life. Well, we finally get out of there, which I'm sure we weren't there very long, but for a little kid, it seemed like we was there for days. We finally get out of there and come back home, and the whole trip, Mom and Dad's talking about, oh, poor old Aunt Nanny, poor old Aunt Nanny. Well, it was a year later my grandpa died, and I remember that Aunt Nanny, she was too bad off to come to Grandpa's funeral, her own father. And I remember the whole family thinking, oh, that's just awful that she can't make it to the funeral. Well, years go by, and I kept throughout the years hearing stories, poor old Aunt Nanny, and how bad off she is. My mother passed away about 12 years after Grandpa. Aunt Nanny couldn't make it to my mother's funeral. She was too bad off. And her husband dies. She can't make it to his funeral because she's too bad off. First one, then another, and then the family falls off, and she can't make it to funerals. Well, finally, this had been about, I'm going to say about 25 years after her original, or, my original visit to Aunt Nanny when I was 5. My stepmother passed away, and Aunt Nanny made it to the viewing. But she sits me down there in the funeral parlor and starts in about, I am so bad off. I am not long for this world. I won't be here much longer. Lord's going to call me home. And she's going on and on. And I'm sitting there listening to this. And I'd had all I could take. I mean, it gets to a time where you've been so patient. And I think, about 25 years is plenty of patience. And the whole family is in there in that funeral home, and they're hearing this. And they're looking at me because they know that I've always been one to speak my mind. And I let her go on for about 15 minutes about how bad off she is. And finally, I just said to her, hey, you think we need to call the director over here right now? And her eyes got really big, and her mouth dropped open. She says, what? And I said, well, you're so bad off. I mean, I can remember ever since I was 5 years old. You've been bad off and about to die. And here you are in the funeral home. I mean, it seems to me like you're in the right place. Maybe we can just get the funeral director over here and start making the arrangements to take you home. You want to go so bad. I mean, that's all we ever hear out of you is how bad off you are. And I mean, I'm nothing if not obliging. I mean, I'll do anything to help you move on. If this is what it takes to help you move on, we'll get the funeral director over here and we'll discuss your arrangements. Oh, she got mad. She huffed and she puffed. But the whole family is looking at me snickering and grinning. And nobody's going to make eye contact with her at all because she is mad. And I said, well, I don't know what you are so angry about, because this is all I have ever heard out of you in my entire life. I mean, I know nothing else about you. I mean, poor old John worked himself to the bone, keeping that house neat and clean and working while you lay on the couch dying, and you've been dying for years. We buried poor old John, and you're still going. We buried half the family. You're still going, but you're still complaining. I've never heard you say anything good, and I've never heard anybody say anything really good about you except poor old Nanny's about to die. Well, after the viewing, everybody come up to the house, because and back in those days, I don't know if they do it so much anymore. But back in those days, everybody had covered dish, neighbors all carried in food and all this, and we had a big table full of food, so the whole family came, and we had plenty of victuals there for everybody to eat. Nanny came to the house, but she was mad, and the whole time she's looking at different relatives. She said, did you hear what she said to me at the funeral home? And I looked at her and I said, well, I did not say anything that anybody else here was not thinking. I've just been the brave one that's come out and said it. I didn't say anything that wasn't true. You need to pull yourself together, because you have been dying for all these years. When are you going to start living? Well, she stayed mad at me. She never did speak to me again after that day. She never came to any more funerals either. And she lasted another 13 years after that funeral and that confrontation, I guess you may call it. And perhaps I should not have called her out in public, but it was my stepmother that I thought very highly of. And I thought her sitting there belly aching, while we're trying to put my stepmother to rest, was in very poor taste. She couldn't come to anybody else's funeral. Why even bother to come to that one? And I got to thinking, there's so many people that are so negative. Everything is negative. The whole life is negative. There never seems to be anything bright and cheery. They don't seem to be living their life. They're sour all the time. If life's a bowl of sour grapes, they don't believe in a life, life's just a bowl of cherries. They're in the sour grapes. And then I saw a television commercial that got me thinking on this very subject. And they had another product. They had a product that's supposed to clear up all this negativity that a person seems to suffer from. When a person is suffering and depressed and sour and mean and all this. And they say that if you take one of these pills before you go to bed at night, when you wake up in the morning, it's going to clear up your entire outlook. And it's a laxative. I think a lot more people need to take a laxative and get all that negativity out of their lives. So from now on, if you ever hear me say anything about, well, I think that person needs a laxative, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Have a nice evening. Bye.